A candidate for Congress is joining the chorus of Democrats opposing the president's zero-tolerance policy at the border. Donna Shalala, who was president of the University of Miami and Secretary of Health and Human Services before that, told me earlier today that the president made the right decision by ending the policy, but she also believes the emotional damage to the children may have already been done.
There was no reason to separate children from their parents. He's done irreparable harm to 2,300 little kids. Psychological harm. These kids are going to have anxiety problems for a very long period of time. Any parent knows that, knows what separation does to young children, and it's disgraceful that the President of the United States thought that this was the right thing to do. No one else in this country did.
Well, the President said that because of the current law and the loopholes in the law, he had no choice but to take the children and hold them separately because he could not hold families together, and he doesn't want to do catch and release because in 80% of the time with catch and release, people don't show up for the hearings. You agree with that?
I don't. And I think he's absolutely wrong, and he's just undoing what he did before, which suggests that there wasn't a law that stood in his way. The agency that he put in charge of this, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, I ran that agency. That agency was not set up to put children in detention. It was actually set up to keep families together and help them to be resettled in the United States, working through Catholic Charities, through the Lutheran Family Services. It's really outrageous that we had to go through this very painful period for the families and for the children in particular. And I worry, as every American does, what we have done to these children.
So then as a member of Congress, you would support catch and release?
I would support a strong border policy. There's no question about it. But I would never support separating children and their families. There's no question that these parents came to the United States because they wanted to protect their children. We have to find a way when families come across our border to keep those families together and to make a decision within a broader immigration policy to take care of them.
So would you support detaining the family?
Well, we certainly need to keep the family together, but we don't need to put them in jail while the judicial process goes on.
But the president says in 80% of the time they don't show up for their hearings.
There are ways to make sure people show up for their hearings in this country. But part of our problem is that we misunderstand what's happening. The vast majority of people who are overstaying their visas really come here legally, not illegally. And they, for the most part, are not minorities. In this case, he's targeting people of color, poor people, and trying to keep them out of the United States after they may, in fact, under our laws, be eligible for asylum because they're coming from terrible situations. But the most important thing here is to focus on the children and what we've just done, what the President of the United States has personally done to thousands of children and their families.
The President has pointed the finger of blame on Democrats, saying that Democrats are not cooperating with any kind of comprehensive immigration reform. As a member of Congress, would you be willing to cooperate with the President and give in to finally come up with a comprehensive immigration bill?
I wouldn't give in to the President, but I certainly would work within my party as well as with the other party on getting a comprehensive, fair, legal immigration strategy for this country.
If the President were to somehow resolve this issue of not separating families, if the President were to find a way to address the DACA kids that are here, would you be willing to give in on funding for a border wall?
That's not good enough. We need an immigration policy that's fair to everyone. It's not just the DACA kids. It's their parents as well as other immigrants and people who have been here under temporary status. We have to solve all of these issues in a comprehensive immigration bill. That's the fair thing to do, and that's what Americans want us to do.
Is a border wall a deal breaker for you?
It's not, but I don't think we're going to get a wall. All of us want safe borders. all of us want a fair immigration system, but it has to be a comprehensive immigration law, and we have to extend the TPS families as well and find a pathway to citizenship for those that are currently here in the United States. But the one thing we must never again allow any president or any political party to do, and that is to harm children.
Donna Shalala, thank you very much.
Thank you.